Okay, hello. This is an emergency. Wake up. There are 2 boats on the ocean containing the last 500 people on Earth. In one boat, 300 people. In another, 200 people. Holes have sprung up in both boats simultaneously, and you can only repair one vessel. People are going to die. What will you do? Who will you save?
This essay is going to be using the story of Kiritsugu from Fate Zero. It's a good show. Go watch it. All spoilers forward in here, obviously. But to be clear, this video isn't really about Fate Zero. It's about the phrase, picking the lesser evil. I'm just going to be using the show as an avenue to explore some interesting concepts of the game theory involved. You don't need to have seen the show, so I invite you to hear me out even if you're skeptical of it, you know? We meet our broody lead, Kiritsugu, as he's entering a Hunger Game battle to the death for a wish-granting relic, the Holy Grail. He wants to use it to wish to create a just world, a world where it's possible to save everyone, and he will do whatever it takes to get it. We don't know much about him at first, but we know Kiritsugu is a man committed to the lesser evil, no matter the cost. He'll pull the lever in the trolley problem, even if it will lead to a man's death. Heck, he'll shoot the man himself if he has to save 5 other people. He's very dispassionate most of the time, but it's pretty obvious that this stuff weighs on him. And when he was a kid, all he wanted to be was a hero for justice. But what Kiritsugu has come to embody instead is a philosophy called utilitarianism. And it's a philosophy at some level you yourself also probably buy into. Let's take a look now at where it can go, and what the show has to say about its flaws. You sticking around? This is your last chance to disembark. Oh, good. You've made one decision. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll be ready to make another one.
The show starts Kiritsugu off by showing us his gentle side, with his wife Irisville and their daughter Ilya. He's a loving father, and he manages to hold that in tandem with what the Grail will require him to do during the war. His wife Irisville, on top of being his most faithful supporter throughout the show, is also the vessel of the Holy Grail, and will have to be killed by his hands in the coming weeks. During the Grail War, he'll also be assisted by a summoned heroic spirit. For him, the servant is Saber, King Ardoria of Britain, who is, basically just a girl King Arthur. Don't worry about it, it's anime. Despite this being a war among ancient mage families, Kiritsugu is a combat pragmatist, and is more than willing to use modern tactics and weaponry. Throughout the show, his ideology clashes prominently with Saber, who operates much more on moral principles and a code of conduct. But we're still rooting for him through and through. His methods are harsh, but his heart's in the right place. Although as the show goes on, it gets harder and harder to support him. Kiritsugu starts coldly killing people who didn't strictly have to die just in case. Because the line has shifted now, to minimizing risks and unknowns. Anything is permitted to save the world, yeah? You can't be having risks with so much at stake. But it's still effective, right?
Okay, let's talk about utilitarianism for real this time. Classical utilitarianism historically has been credited to Jeremy Bentham, who was a hot mess of a man we will not talk about. Because the utilitarianism I'm talking about is not his. I'm talking about the utilitarianism of Light Yagami and Tywin Lannister, not John Stuart Mills. It's the moral intuition I think all of us at some level have, that all else being equal, you should accept the less evil choices, because essentially, less evil means more good. Yeah? Even if it means getting your hands dirty. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to accept the premise that saving/helping more people is equivalent to less evil, even though there's a lot to criticize about that logic. I'm also going to be using the terms utilitarianism and consequentialism interchangeably, even though they are technically distinct concepts. Just, deal with it, alright? Welfare utilitarianism has a lot of problems, but I'm solely exploring it through the lens of the lesser evil, okay? I know there's a lot of ways philosophers have tried to address these issues through more intricate and niche philosophical rules. We'll get there eventually, but first let's delve into what shape Kiritsugu's philosophy actually takes. Kiritsugu fights for the greater good, or more accurately, the lesser evil, as we've established. All he wants to do is save the most people possible, and that objective is what he centers all of his moral calculus around. He's not delusional. He knows he can't save everyone. There's no way to make it through life without loss. But if you're gonna save people, what matters is doing the most good, right? No matter what that demands you do personally. And hey, his methods thus far, work. He's extremely effective, and it goes so far that he does eventually get the Grail. he's not emotionless, although he wants to be, and he tries his hardest to turn himself into a cold agent of pragmatism. He goes so far as to performatively cheat on his wife with a mistress to build himself up emotionally to being able to murder her later. Look, I said he had emotions, not that he was healthy about them. At one point, he even breaks down and begs to just forget all this and run away with Irisville. He's not a cold person, and he does feel love. And let's cut him some slack. He knows his methods aren't enough. That's the whole reason he's after the Holy Grail. His wish is to save everyone and become a hero for justice, and to create a world where innocent people don't have to die. Deep down, he's motivated by a deeply innocent and pure care for others. But reality is reality, and you can't save everyone. Not without a miracle. And so, he will do what he has to, and lose what he has to ensure that he finally can. And I think we can all agree, all else being equal, you should save the most lives, right? Kiritsugu also gets to break in and directly make some pretty damning criticisms of Saber's alternative, moralistic worldview instead. Saber, for example, has morals that limit what she will do to achieve her goals. But if her goals are really so important, handicapping her methods to be noble is irresponsible, especially out of some misguided sense that there's a right way to win. That's what consequentialism strives to do better. It strives to take responsibility for the consequences of your actions, unlike more restrictive moral systems that limit what you can do, even if it demands that you act in ways that are considered morally reprehensible. What matters is making a better world, and what matters is doing the most good, no matter what the action itself is. And on that front, a lot of people consider it a more mature and realistic philosophy. Like, to quote Tywin, for example, explain to me why it's more noble to kill 10,000 men in battle than a dozen at dinner.
Kiritsugu was a sweet kid who just wanted to be a hero for justice. He wanted to save everyone. Growing up on an island with his father, his dad worked on forbidden science in pursuit of immortality. One day, his friend Shirley got infected by a plague his father was experimenting on. She begged Kiritsugu to kill her to save everyone else she knew she would hurt, but he didn't have the heart to kill her and ran. That cowardice led to his entire village being infected. He learns that his father plans to run away and continue his research. Don't worry though, Kiritsugu learns from his mistakes earlier and kills his father. He couldn't let his dad endanger anyone else. Growing up as a mercenary, he continues to strive to save people through his work, but time and time again learns that he has to let innocent people die if he wants to do the most good. His mentor and mother figure raises him, steering him the best she can, but one day a mission goes wrong. Now she's trapped in a plane with another dangerous plague. She is flying the plane and is unsure how she's going to make it out of this one. Kiritsugu is helpless on the ground. He talks with her, his last living loved one, through this harrowing ordeal. He's scared he's going to lose her. And then, when he's on the brink of losing everything once again, he shoots down the plane she's in himself. It's too big a risk to let her land. The plague could escape and infect others. He breaks down. Sobbing, he murmurs, I saved a lot of people, Shirley. I didn't make the same mistake again. And collects himself.
I think we need to be honest with ourselves about what's going on here. Kiritsugu doesn't know for sure that she can't make it out of the situation safely. Here, utilitarianism is not born out of some 5D intelligent strategy of the right course of action. It's born out of fear, and being scared of making the same mistakes he made as a kid. It's not seeking to do the most good, it's seeking to minimize the possibility of bad. Which makes it petrified of unknowns with incalculable odds. It's caution masquerading as rationality. Utilitarianism doesn't handle gambles and unknowns well, and I cannot emphasize this enough. In real life, we never know the odds, so it's never sane to bet on gambles over certainty, and it justifies refusing to be brave in the face of unknowns. You can't just have faith in others and hope situations will work out. The fear of loss permeates utilitarian decision-making, and the fear of failure and helplessness to change things for the better. Kiritsugu doesn't want to risk it because he doesn't believe in the possibility of things turning out for the better. But this alternative obsession with minimizing loss is not the same thing as making the world a better place. And sometimes being scared of situations with a lot of unknown variables can lead you to doubling down on what's safe, familiar, and secure, even if it's actually the choice that leads to more harm. And there's nothing stopping utilitarian logic operating as a cope to let yourself live with doing horrible, unnecessary things. It responds to the possibility of things going terribly wrong by personally ensuring less bad but certain things happen instead, even if that procures the possibility of better things happening alternatively. And just like that, he's back under the cold face of dispassionate efficiency. He just killed his mom out of an abundance of caution. And that's the interesting thing about consequentialism. You have to actually know the consequences. And to take that irony further, consequentialism itself has a lot of unforeseen consequences. Which brings us to the Holy Grail.
Kiritsugu has made it to his goal, and is finally put face to face with the Holy Grail itself. It takes him into its realm, and takes the shape of his wife. As he readies to make his wish, he realizes that the Grail itself now has a will. The Holy Grail, as it turns out, has been corrupted to warp whatever wish comes to it to facilitate death and destruction. And it is delighted at Kiritsugu's wish, because it lends itself so perfectly to death and destruction already. Kiritsugu is confused, but before he can even take in the situation, he is forcefully taken to a scenario you'll be familiar with. There are 2 boats on the ocean. In one boat, 300 people. In another, 200 people. Holes have sprung up in both boats simultaneously, and you can only repair one vessel. People are going to die. What will you do? Naturally, Kiritsugu chooses the 300. The 200 are outraged. They come to him and demand he fix their boat first, and involuntarily, Kiritsugu himself guns down the 200 people personally for impeding the lesser evil.
The premises of consequentialism require that you don't have control over the situations themselves. It only dictates how you respond to them. Your actions are predictable, calculable responses to variables. But others can calculate your response too, and given anything is allowed as long as it's the lesser evil, that makes your actions very, very easy to manipulate based on those variables. Without hard rules on what you refuse to do, you become a flexible tool as long as the circumstances demand that you do something as less evil. This, in effect, makes you a pawn of whoever sets up the situation. If someone wants you to keep giving them money, they just need to make the alternative worse. If they want your vote, they just need to make the alternative be worse. And if they want you to kill a lot of people, they just need to convince you that the alternative is worse. You have lost agency at this point, powerless to whatever systemic variables the game master presents to you. You become a hostage to whoever controls the situation. And those in power who are smart enough will set up the situation to force you to further empower them. And they're less evil further as well. Lesser evil just needs to be ready to have a greater evil. And if the variables present genociding all life, but maybe oppose it a little, as the lesser evil, you will dutifully, actively support the genocide personally. At which point it's a question of if that even is the lesser evil, or if it's just successively enabling your preferred evil.
Utilitarianism may claim to take responsibility for its outcomes, to ensure the best case scenarios, but in effect, it cedes all responsibility to the systems itself in determining what it is allowed to do.
Consequentialist logic gets even more wild when you get into power structures. If your actions are merely the output of your assessment of the present variables, with no moral boundaries, then you can be compelled to any action by anyone who has power over those variables, as long as they make the alternative worse. I mentioned this in my previous video, but for example, despots in power make their replacement vile on purpose to this end, as a threat to force you to keep them in power. People can make themselves the lesser evil if you allow yourself to be enslaved to that logic. And this can and will actively make the world worse, not better. It's very important to separate the concept of behaving optimally from behaving successfully. Logically optimal behavior can still be the vessel of your own self-destruction if we concede to its logic. There's a reason it's a common phrase among people who enable evil to say they had no other choice or they were just following orders. consequentialism itself demands that you do abhorrent things and takes away your option to refuse evil on its own merit, which makes you very useful to systems designed to inflict harm, as Kiritsugu learns.
You did it. You saved the most people. 300 people were saved. With their original boat damaged, they decide to continue their boat journey on 2 different boats. Now, 200 people are on one boat, and 100 people are on the other. Again, 2 leaks spring up, and you can only save 1 boat. Again, you kill 100 people automatically. You started with 500 people, and you have personally killed 300 as the lesser evil. Kiritsugu is baffled. How could this be the lesser evil if more people died than were saved? But the Grail explains that while it has overwhelming power, it needs an algorithm to enact someone's wish, and only knows how to follow the procedures the wishmaker themselves does. The 200 remaining split off into 2 boats, and again you kill. Split off into 2 boats, and again you kill. Split off into 2 boats, and again...
I think a lot of people see this situation and interpret it to just be saying, well, what if you have to keep doing trolley problems? But I don't think that's quite right. I think the more compelling point shown here is about how consequentialism only works if, well, you actually know and control the consequences of a situation. Kiritsugu has no way to know future boats were going to spring leaks. He has no way to know if the people he's saving are going to be imperiled, and the people he just personally massacred would have found a way to survive if not for him murdering them. Utilitarianism only works in the world of extremely constrictive thought experiments for a reason. If you start making the variables even a smidge more complicated, its apparent success breaks down, and breaks down hard. The entire appeal of utilitarianism is that it takes responsibility for the consequences of your actions, and that you won't doom society because you're taking a principled stand. But the question becomes, what happens when what you thought was the best action isn't? And how will you know? There's a difference between the foreseen, the foreseeable, the probable, and the intended. And further, what are you meant to do if you don't know some information that is pertinent? Generally, utilitarianism shifts to following economic logic of maximizing outcome probabilities instead. But let's see what happens when we tug that thread. The prisoner's dilemma is one layer of added complexity. You and your partner are both arrested. The cops, as they do, try to get you to snitch on each other. If both of you stick together and stay quiet, you'll both only be locked up for 1 year. If your partner snitches on you, he gets to go free and you get locked up for 20 years. Same if you rat on him. And if both of you snitch, then each of you get 5 years. The best outcome here is for both of you to only get 1 year, yeah? But the dominant strategy here is to snitch, because you have no way of knowing whether or not your partner will or will not snitch themselves. From consequentialist logic, therefore, it is always optimal to snitch, to minimize harm done, because you can't account for that unknown. And yet, consequentialist logic makes the least bad outcome of both of you only serving 1 year literally impossible. An more illuminating example comes up in minimum wage. If you're offered a pay of either $5 or nothing, should you take the money? $5 is better than nothing. It's less evil. Well, we see what happens when people do choose the lesser evil in that situation. Systemically, it allows the minimum wage to get lower and lower. Sometimes settling for the most good enables a worse future. The situation also reveals something important, though, in terms of the leverage you have over people. In context of wages, the situation resembles a hostage negotiation. Not everyone can afford to take a principled stance and refuse being underpaid for their labor. And rejecting the leverage power has over you is not as simple as moral principles. But at that point, we aren't talking about what's ethical to do. We're talking about what you have been coerced to do. And recognizing the difference when it comes up and not excusing it as ethical is important to avoid rationalization. It also reveals something even more important. Collective action of many kind can be undermined by utilitarian logic, even if that ultimately makes things worse for all parties, as collective action adds a degree of uncertainty in your own ability to activate power. And I'd like to take pains to note here that I'm not saying we should solve systemic injustices by all individually refusing to participate by taking the moral high ground. Just that, regardless of what it does or doesn't solve, it's important not to justify to yourself while conceding under leverage that what you're doing is ethics.
We all need to be more willing to admit to ourselves when what we are doing is something indefensible. At least we integrate ourselves into what actions the system forces upon us. Everyone thinks what they're doing is justified as the lesser evil. The phrase, "there is no ethical consumption under capitalism," for example, doesn't excuse anything, but rather serves as an acknowledgement that we're all humans doing our best in a system that we did not create and can't necessarily control as much as we'd wish. Things can be unethical and still, well, what we decide to do given other priorities and needs we have. And this is a problem inherent to the lesser evil. It can lead us to substitute pragmatic or normative arguments for moral ones, and in doing so, demote the substantive ethical considerations that should be driving our decision-making. It blurs the line between accepting a bad outcome and validating an unacceptable one, making bad outcomes more likely to come to pass. But why does Kiritsugu believe so adamantly that he has no power to do more than the choices he's given? Because the trauma and crisis he's experienced has made him afraid and retreating into security. And that's what this ultimately comes back to. He doesn't believe a better world is possible through himself. So in his denial, he justifies enabling things he understands are atrocities as the best he can do. It gives rise to an approach that refuses to admit error, concede flaws, or consider improvement. A world where greater evil must lose is also where lesser evil must thrive. And the thing is, when you set the bar low, you tend to attract things that slither and crawl. The lesser evil lowers the floor of what we stand for to a hair's breadth above the greater evil. And the effect of repeatedly lowering your standards is grave. It establishes an ever-increasing slope, a race to the bottom that skews the best option to be micrometers above the alternative. I hope this can show how introducing human perceptual error into moral decision-making can make things go quite wrong. Consequentialist thinking doesn't ensure the best outcomes, and in fact, can ensure the worst outcomes. And okay, I'm done. It's time to talk about the real problem here. How it changes you. After the Grail makes Kiritsugu kill everyone else in the thought experiment, there's only 3 people left. Kiritsugu's mistress, his wife, and his daughter. Kiritsugu walks forward, in a daze. Automatically, without thought, Kiritsugu kills his mistress and carries on.
And we're shown another problem with his method. It necessitates seeing life as comparable, simply units that can be rearranged and evaluated like tokens. You reduce people to evaluations, but that's not all it does. Sacrifices in utilitarianism become a hammer, and a lot of situations start looking like nails. There's a reason in the show Kiritsugu resolves nearly all situations with some variation of murder, even when you could argue it wasn't necessary. His moral system, by explicitly permitting it, makes outsized room for it in his thought process as a solution. The larger conflict utilitarianism has with seeing other people's humanity is an enormous topic that I plan to explore in depth another time. Some variables are known, some important variables, but we don't know what we don't know, which includes which variables will end up being the important ones. Utilitarianism can be useful as a retrospective analysis, but on the whole rarely as a prospective guidance for a choice before you, and the less so, the larger the scope of variables, such as when you are discussing all of society. The game board is one of gambles, extrapolation, and assumption. There are not as many clear-cut optimal foreseeable plays as we'd like to imagine. All there are consistent decisions, if that's something that you care about. But utilitarianism is the death of solidarity, especially when you think you can beat it, throw other people under the bus, and not have it change you and make it easier for you to do it again, next time. The moment people become pieces, a wall has formed between you and them that allows you to do things as long as you can justify it to yourself. And humans' ability to justify things to themselves is endless. You don't think every one of your political enemies also has convinced themselves that what they're doing is the lesser evil, as they participate in and actively uphold systems of evil? You need to be able to buffer yourself against that. You need moral boundaries.
And then, at the end of it all, there is only his family. The Grail takes the form of his wife, embodying all the world's evils. She promises him that he need only make his wish, and that finally he can be happy and at peace again. Let the Grail use his method to create the perfect world he wants. He holds his daughter in his hand, holds her tenderly, and then, with a quiet goodbye, holds his gun to her chin. His wife screams. He grabs her throat as she begs to know why he rejected her and his family and his wish. He says it's simple. 6 billion people versus 2 of his family. It's an easy choice. So he kills her as she lets out one last curse on his life. Her neck snaps.
What Kiritsugu realizes here is that utilitarianism fails on its own logic. Utilitarianism as a decision-making procedure fails utilitarianism as a barometer or a criteria for justice. There is no rule that choosing to pick the lesser evil is a good way to actually achieve it. And as we've seen, there are times when doing so can actually ensure worse outcomes. So even under a utilitarianist mindset, he realizes that his utilitarian algorithm itself is the greater evil here. Utilitarianism subjugates yourself to algorithmic logic. And if you have been paying any amount of attention to the tech world right now, as it turns out, algorithmic decision-making leads to a lot less good than you might have expected. This makes utilitarianism helpless as a tactic to defeat unjust systems, as it exists solely on minimizing risks, not maximizing justice, and it can only exist as a reactive force between options. The problem is, systems by their very nature make it so opposing them is high risk. It appeals to our bias towards the known and predictable and safe. It's a system of thinking that limits your imagination, as it can only account for possibilities that you imagine operating within securely. But as it turns out, humans are pretty bad at knowing how things can change in the ways they never could have anticipated. We have partial data about the future, and operating as if the future is a predefined entity is planning for impotence and failure. And that's an arrogance that has been actively reinforced in us through being taught falsely that history is just a sequence of people being able to foresee the best choices and making them. And, critically, under utilitarianism, all you have to do to diffuse someone as a threat is make them believe they can't defeat you. Due to being too powerful, or the evil being too entrenched, or feeling it unlikely that others will come to your aid. The system can deem you powerless, and you have no choice but to accept it. Because if all you care about are consequences, why would you fight if you can't realistically win?
Having destroyed the Grail, Kiritsugu unfortunately still managed to partially unleash its evil. As a gaping void opens above his city, a flood of destruction and miasma pours out of the gap, raining death and destruction into the surrounding area. Kiritsugu looks on with horror, on the brink of emotional collapse. He looks down at his hands, weary, incapable of doing good. He cries out.
Utilitarianism has no answer when there's no way they can see themselves through the flowchart to victory. If you can't see a lesser evil, you either give up or convince yourself a lesser evil exists when it doesn't. This is in large part responsible for the prevalence of doomerism, or alternatively buying into delusional greenwashing initiatives like net zero by 2050. People want to be given a believable choice as the lesser evil. And when you are primed for that, if you are given a lesser evil, you'll take it, regardless of if it is in actuality less evil, and not just a more comfortable avenue towards the same outcome.
Kiritsugu struggles to look through the rubble for survivors. There's no one left.
But there's purpose in fighting, even when it accomplishes nothing. The utilitarian will try to concoct something it accomplishes to justify the action under utilitarianism. But that just reveals how useless it is as an ethical system or strategy. It works backwards to justify itself. It limits your imagination to refuse to understand the world as anything more than logical actions that are optimizing for a constructed purpose. But you don't need to justify actions to take them. It's for itself. And if you're someone who buys into utilitarianism, I imagine at this point your brain's trying to collapse any way of doing things under utilitarianism. Because if somehow it does lead to the best outcome, then, well, it's optimal because it's maximizing your objectives. And if you just had the right information or the right variables in advance, you would have known, and then under utilitarianism, it would have been the right call. Or it's optimal because you calculated the probability of social traction, or it's optimal because you're applying a rules-based formula that ultimately will act in long-term self-interest. This is brainworms. This is lesser evilism trying to justify its continued place when it's outlived its usefulness. And at that point, we need to ask ourselves what purpose it really is serving us, and if we are not just holding onto it as a security blanket in a world full of unknowns. It's comforting to think that we can know what to do, and that we can know and calculate what the best thing to do is. But we don't. Sometimes we just gotta be brave.
Kiritsugu struggles to look through the rubble for survivors. There's no one left.
And hey, let's take a look at Kiritsugu's dad. The origin point that taught Kiritsugu that sometimes you gotta kill to save others. Kiritsugu's abhorrence for all the deaths that happened on his island is what put him on this path. But to his dad, killing all those inhabitants and continuing regardless was the lesser evil, on the path toward developing immortality to benefit all of humankind. The research his dad was doing in the first place operated on the exact same principles that Kiritsugu comes to tragically adopt himself. It's still evil, and not recognizing this makes Kiritsugu no better than his father.
Kiritsugu struggles to look through the rubble for survivors. There's no one left.
Utilitarianism acts upon you just as you act upon it. It lies to you, it distorts thinking. It trains you to throw other people under the bus, to believe that's fine, and it protects us from accepting honestly when we're making ethical concessions and failures, and allows us to justify them to ourselves. These choices affect us, change us, especially in the ways that buying into things justify doing so further later.
Kiritsugu struggles to look through the rubble for survivors. There's no one left.
And that's ultimately the reason to reject the trolley problem. These scenarios make demands of you, when in real life, you should be making demands of the scenarios.
Kiritsugu finds a young boy under some rubble. He's still breathing. Kiritsugu cries. The boy looks up at his savior's face, the relief and joy, and is unsure which one of them has been saved.
Now we come to where Kiritsugu goes next. He stops trying to be optimal. Instead of trying to calculate the decision that'll save the most people, he instead decides, with no further detail, to save someone. That's all. He develops a positivist view of ethics, where he makes things better, actively, and does good, not merely minimizes harm. Even when the lesser evil seems necessary, that doesn't mean the choices can't be contingent upon demanding more of the world around you. Power concedes nothing without a demand. To demand more of the world, you need to be willing to use the leverage you have, and conceding it weakens both your internal capacity to demand more and your structural ability to get it. This isn't black and white. I'm not saying you can't make plans and priorities. Sometimes you have limited capacity of resources. Usually you have limited capacity of resources. But similarly, don't be so hasty to sacrifice your principles in the name of crumbs. And look, you can't just believe in yourself so hard losses don't happen. But consequentialism is risk-adverse. It's founded on flawed human cognitive biases and justifications. And it's the enemy of bravery. But bravery and principles and standards are a form of power too. And being unmovable also gives you leverage over those who seek to use you. We're taught the world is changed via calculus, that genius and strategy and gamesmanship is how change works. But it's not. It's a fight of injustice you are always pushing against. And readying yourself to settle for less can stop you from being willing to fight for more, to be better and see your failures as what they are, failures. To admit the humanity of people rather than seeing it as just math. And to draw lines and make demands of yourself to do more than just the possible. To demand and make the impossible possible, even when you don't know for sure how or if you can. And, as much as you can summon from yourself, to fight even when you don't think you can change things. The inevitable is a lie that serves those in power and confines those who oppose it, and obscures the systems of leverage and power enforcing and benefiting the status quo. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what's possible, it matters what's necessary and what we will make possible. Trolley problems are traps. These choices manipulate you, confine your thinking, turn you into less than you are, and demand you make moral concessions. They're asking you to give up the leverage of your own ethical mooring. They make you less than you're capable of being. You're not going to be a helpless bystander to history, only able to enable it. And you can refuse the logic of systemic oppression, even when it's holding you hostage. The choice of what it really means to do whatever it takes to oppose injustice is one they've distorted. Defy the trolley problem. Forget the two boats. And don't turn yourself into servants of these variables. These aren't the situations that matter, that you need to prepare yourself for.
It's a dark night in the city, but the streets are covered in light and smoke. You hear sirens. You're in a protest. Your neighbor was recently killed by the police. It's hard to breathe. The protest is being attacked by officers, and the friends you came with are scattering. Some people you don't know have been left behind, and are being cornered by the police. You're cold. You see an officer go for their baton. You've never been in a fight. You don't believe you can do anything to help. You take a step. Do you choose to be brave?